Assalamu alaikum, dear viewers. Welcome back to our channel. Is it imaginable that someone with knowledge of Deen could ever curse a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? How could someone who was so near to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that people used to approach him to ask him to pray for them betray someone as exalted as Musa alayhi salam? This incident is hardly discussed and known, even though it had such an impact that 2 complete verses of the Holy Quran were based on it. Who was that person who committed such a crime? What happened? And what is the real incident that took place that led to this betrayal? Let's delve into the video to know all the details. Balam, also known as Balam ibn Ba'ura, was a highly esteemed member of his society. He belonged to Syria and lived in Canaan near Jerusalem. He was a man of profound spiritual knowledge, renowned among his people for his wisdom and piety. He belonged to Bani Israel, the disciples of Prophet Musa alayhi salam, and was regarded as an intellectual individual capable of connecting directly with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. His prayers were said to be answered quickly. This incident occurred during the time following the Israelites' conquest of Egypt by Musa alayhi salam, and Pharaoh had met his fate by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. After this incident, the Prophet Musa alayhi salam and his followers were ordered by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to wage war against a people known as Jabbaran. The approaching army of Prophet Musa alayhi salam terrified the Jabbaran, who had witnessed the demise of Pharaoh and his people. Now, they found themselves in a fix. They wanted Musa alayhi salam to be defeated, but they did not want to fight them. Therefore, they thought about a plan. As they had come to know about the pious man Balam and how most of his supplications were answered by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They came to Balam and told him that the Prophet Musa alayhi salam was a powerful man who had come with a large army to evict them from their land. He should thus pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he may turn them back without battling them. As previously stated, Balam was a devout guy. Thus, he responded that he knew how Prophet Musa alayhi salam was a person with high rank in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and had all the support of the angels as well. Therefore, he would not make any such supplication against Musa alayhi salam, because then it would ruin his own worldly life as well as the hereafter. However, when he was much insisted, he agreed to it on the condition that he would first ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if he could make such a request against a prophet, and only if the answer was yes would he make the supplication. So, Balam prayed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for guidance in this matter, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did guide him through it, since Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade him from making any such prayer as he was asked to do. So, Balam informed Jabbaran about the command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and how he could not move forward with any such prayer against the Prophet Musa alayhi salam. When Jabbaran saw that Balam did not agree to their request by any means, they thought of trying to bribe Balam with worldly gifts such as lands and other materials. Surprisingly, Balam got influenced by those gifts and accepted them. Some narrations also suggest that he was not ready to accept them, but his wife made him do so. Gradually, the lure of power and wealth weakened Balam's faith. Despite knowing it was wrong, he allowed greed to overcome his sense of faithfulness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Balam chose the worldly life over the akhirah afterlife, making the decision to turn against the very teachings he once upheld. After accepting all the bribes of money and land, Balam was commanded to complete his job, for which he was given all these payments. Balam tried to curse the Prophet Musa alayhi salam out loud in front of everyone so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's wrath may fall upon him. But what took place after that was not at all known to anyone present. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala restrained Balam's tongue from uttering any such curse against Prophet Musa alayhi salam. And when he tried harder, he uttered the curse but referenced the people of Jabbaran rather than Prophet Musa alayhi salam. The leaders of Jabbaran got terrified and rebuked Balam that he was using his power against them instead of Prophet Musa alayhi salam. Balam replied that he had no control over his words and that he was powerless to speak out against Musa alayhi salam. Thus, the curse that the Jabbarin wanted to take over Prophet Musa alayhi salam fell upon the Jabbarin themselves, and they got destroyed by it without engaging in any battle with Musa alayhi salam. As for Balam, he too got punished by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as he tried to use his blessing against a prophet only for worldly gains, even though he was prohibited by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from doing so. The tongue with which he used to try to curse Prophet Musa alayhi salam grew so long and elastic that it protruded from his mouth and extended to his chest. The story did not finish there. Balam now understood that he had lost his blessing as well as his connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, instead of asking for forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he went deeper into sinning. Some of the people of Jabbarin were alive, and Balam gave them a very evil and sinister suggestion that could make the shield of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fall from the people of Bani Israel. He suggested they send beautiful adulteresses to Bani Israel so that they can lure their men to commit zina. Balam had the knowledge of the book, and he knew that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not shield those tribes whose men are involved in this despicable sin. He also knew that zina not only makes the shield of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lift, but it is also the fastest way to invoke the wrath of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon a tribe. He told them that an adulterous person can never win over the enemy. Therefore, Jabbarin sent some adulteresses over to Bani Israel, whose job it was to make the men fall into sexual desires. It would not be difficult as they would be more inclined to commit adultery while away from their homes. Because of Musa alayhi salam's guidance, all of the men were able to avoid this transgression. But one notable tribe member was tricked and committed the sin in secret. And as Balam had predicted, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's wrath fell upon the Israelites, and they were hit by a severe plague, which resulted in the deaths of around 70,000 people in a single day. Consequently, the person who had committed the sin was murdered, along with the girl, and was hung by the Israelites in a public place. Then they turned to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in repentance and asked His forgiveness, which relieved them of this disgraceful punishment. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned the story of Balam, who was a person who went against a prophet and tried to curse him even though he was a man who had the knowledge of Islam. He was not only a very respectful person in the community, but also was blessed to have his prayers answered. He knew the high status of Prophet Musa alayhi salam and was also warned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself to not make supplication against a prophet in any situation. But instead of using his knowledge and blessings for good, his greed for worldly life overtook him, and he became one of the losers who got no benefit in this world nor in the hereafter. His story is mentioned in the Quran, where he is compared with a dog because of his greed and desires. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions him in the Quran. And relate to them, O Prophet, the story of the one to whom we gave our signs, but he abandoned them, so Satan took hold of him, and he became a deviant. If we had willed, we would have elevated him with our signs, but he clung to this life, following his evil desires. His example is that of a dog. If you chase it away, it pants, and if you leave it, it still pants. This is the example of the people who deny our signs. So narrate to them stories of the past, so perhaps they will reflect. No amount of religious knowledge can protect a person if their heart is inclined toward worldly desires. Balam had the knowledge but was ultimately swayed by his attachment to worldly gains. This story is a reminder for us to keep our hearts free from worldly greed and lust. This story is also a reminder of how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protected His noble servants and prophets against the attacks of the enemies and Satan. Balam's curses could not touch Musa alayhi salam, proving that no harm can reach someone whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shields. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from greed and desires of the treasures of the temporary world. Ameen. That's all for today, dear viewers. We hope that you find this video informative and engaging. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more insightful content. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum.